We all go to the grocery store to get what we need either for ourselves or our families, but you never expect moments like this to happen.
Let's go.
Yes, all Westlake guys.
Now what you're seeing is the terrifying scene after this woman allegedly stabbed a 3-year-old boy and his mom in a random attack at a Giant Eagle last June. 3-year-old Julian Wood was killed in the attack, and his mom Margot was also stabbed. But the woman allegedly behind it didn't get very far from the grocery store's parking lot.
211, I need a car to go help the kid. These are the first couple aisles.
Where's your cuffs? You got cuffs? Who's got cuffs?
Slow down.
Hold on. We're good.
All right. Yep. Okay.
Ken, you want me to go to the female or Giant Eagle?
Go to the female.
Hey! She's in the first 3 rows, farthest north. Copy, I will be up.
You got a med kit?
Okay. Roll her on the side. You're good. Who's got a med kit with her?
You gotta get her up.
We have a female in custody.
Are you bleeding? Are you hurt anywhere?
Nice right there.
5217, I'm out.
Let's get her up. There you go, man.
Pull you up, okay? Grab your other arm. We're going to lift you up, okay?
Stand up, okay?
1, 2, 3, stand up. Stand up. Come on.
In route. 14's in route with the exit.
All right, let's put her in the back of my
Hang
car.
on, I'm gonna check her right here.
Let's go to Giant Eagle.
Okay.
Fires and dispatch. I'm on the phone to the lot.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Park her back this way.
52 LO3, I got 3 units.
Slide on your
1719 myself. At Giant Eagle. In the parking lot, third aisle, if you got EMS coming. We don't have anything here for kids. Petro, out in the parking lot. We're out in the parking lot.
Take a seat. I'm going to crank up the AC for you, okay?
We gotta get some tape, rip this off. Get any tape back here?
Tape?
Yeah.
So that's Bionca Ellis. She's the one accused of being behind the horrifying fatal stabbing. Investigators even caught her on surveillance video after she stole 2 knives from a thrift store nearby the Giant Eagle. From there, she went over to the grocery store, spotted 3-year-old Julian and his mom, then followed them outside to the parking lot. And the details are even more horrible. She allegedly stabbed the toddler in the face and back, and his mom in the shoulder. I mean, this is a grocery store. There's a lot of shoppers inside and in the parking lot. But let's hear from one eyewitness and what he saw that day.
And just stabbed.
She say anything?
No, I didn't hear anything. I had my windows out. I didn't hear anything. All I heard was just screaming, and the lady grabbed her child up out the cart, and that's when it fell over, and they collapsed over here, and the lady just continued to walk off, and that's when everybody just kind of came out of nowhere. Yeah. And I got out. The one guy, he said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know. I'm going to go look." I came about halfway, and I saw her trying to get away, so I hopped in the car and chased her down.
Okay.
To almost where that white building is.
Yeah.
That's when I called 911, and like literally 30 seconds later, you guys showed up.
Okay. All right, cool. So the kid was in a car? In the car?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was in the car fell over?
Yeah.
So that was in June. Oh, and by the way, she was charged with aggravated murder, attempted murder, felonious assault, endangering children, tampering with evidence, and theft. But then in September, her trial was put on hold because she was ordered to go to an inpatient facility after she was deemed incompetent to stand trial. And it kind of makes sense. You're accused of stabbing a little boy who you didn't know and his mom in a random attack. It's pretty serious accusations. But to make matters worse, in one of your first court hearings, you're seen smiling, even giggling when your indictment is read out loud. So obviously her behavior raised concerns about her mental health. She later went through a 20-day evaluation, and that's when the doctor said she might not be competent for a trial setting, but said there was substantial probability of restoration to competency with a statutory time frame if provided with the course of treatment. According to News 5 Cleveland, that statutory time frame in Ohio is a year. And it appears the doctor was right, because this week both the prosecution and the defense agreed Bionca's treatment was working. So now her case will move forward, and her trial is already on the calendar set for this summer. But for Julian's family, you can't help but think how unimaginable this all is for them. Last summer, family members created a GoFundMe page, writing in part, "Our family is overwhelmed with sadness and overwhelmed with the loving support the community has already provided us. This will be an incredibly long journey to recovery, but truthfully, we will never recover. But we will continue to share stories about our beautiful baby boy. His laugh, his cheesy smile, his rambunctious attitude, his love of dinosaurs, his love of school, his obsession with his new baby sister, and wrestling his big brother every chance he gets, and all the other beautiful things about that sweet little boy." Now, just a few days after Bionca's arrest, Julian's father fought back tears as he told the judge to do everything they can to keep this monster behind bars. And it's likely she'll stay behind bars, but it'll ultimately be up to a jury to decide when she goes on trial. This story really just breaks my heart, and let's break down this latest update with criminal defense attorney Safa Robinson-Ferrer. Safa, always great to see you, and thank you so much for joining me. You know, I remember when the stabbing first happened last year, and we cover a lot of awful and heartbreaking cases here, but this one really stands out to me because going to the grocery store is something people do every single day. I mean, my mom used to take me with her all the time, and then something like this happens, and it appears so random. The victims didn't even know Bionca Ellis. What's your reaction to this story?
It's absolutely heartbreaking. You know, nobody asks for these things to happen. And when you're going to the grocery store or doing things that you would normally do in your day-to-day life, you know, for something like this to happen is just completely devastating. And it's scary. We're hearing about a lot more attacks and things of that nature, some of these things rooted in mental health, and it's really getting scary. But unfortunately, you know, these things have been happening.
And just this past summer, months after the stabbing, Bionca Ellis was first incompetent to stand trial. Now she's been deemed competent. Talk to me about that whole process. And can any of the evaluation be used by prosecutors or even the defense during her trial?
Yeah, so what happens, and this took place in the state of Ohio, practically speaking, we're speaking here from New York, but, you know, there is a statutory provision that deals with mental health and competency in the law. In the state of New York, it's called 730. And so what ultimately happens in Ohio has their set of laws that deal with this sort of issue as well, is if there's a question of a person's competency or fitness to stand trial or aid in their defense, then their attorney will say to the judge and the prosecutor, hey, I think that my client has some sort of mental health diagnosis, the diagnosis, disease, or defect. And as a result of these things, we want to have an order and evaluation done by a psychiatric provider to determine whether or not they're fit to stand trial and aid in their defense. The court will order that exam to take place. And usually, oftentimes, a person's in custody. They go and they interview the subject, ask a number of questions. Then they deem whether or not the person is competent or incompetent. If at some point in time during the litigation, the person's deemed incompetent to stand trial, then there will essentially be a hold and they will be put under a psychiatric hold or order so that they can gain treatment. And ultimately, the hope would be that they can at some point regain competency to stand trial and to aid in their defense. And it sounds like that's what happened here.
And, the trial now set for July. And I believe, during one of her first court appearances, she was smiling into the camera and at the defense table when the judge was reading her charges. And again, the family was there. It was really kind of hard to watch, given that a young boy, 3 years old, died allegedly by her. And of course, we still have to say allegedly here. So with that being said, how do you think she'll play in front of a jury? Do you think she might end up doing kind of the same antics in a way, even during her trial? Or how do you think she'll kind of read across given the severity of what happened?
Be an interesting question. So initially, when she presented in these sorts of ways, at that point in time, I believe that's when the 730 or the competency exam was ordered. So those behaviors could have been as a result of whatever mental health crisis she was going through at that time or mental health diagnosis that she had. Now that she's regained competency, it will be interesting to see, through the continuous court appearances, what her demeanor is like. Is she more calm? Is she, more attentive to what's going on? Can she appropriately and adequately respond to questions and prompts by her attorney and sometimes the judge? Once we get to trial, that's going to also play out in front of the jury. You have some jurors who may be more, and we'll see what the defense is, there may unfortunately be, and I say unfortunately because there's nothing that excuses the loss of a life of a child or anybody for that matter. But why did this happen? Was there something going on, some sort of mental health implication going on? Some jurors are going to look at that and say, well, how does this factor into my determination of whether this person is guilty or innocent? And how does mental health factor into, at the time of the offense, if that person could formulate the culpable mental state for that crime or for these crimes? So the jury is going to have to look at that and pay attention to that. I'm sure there are going to be some jurors who, are not sympathetic to that. And there may be some that are. And how she presents in court will definitely be interesting. They will take how she presents in court in order to assist them in their determination and decision making on whether or not she ultimately was guilty or not guilty.
To me, it seems like this case can be really hard to defend with so much evidence, like the surveillance video, the fact that she was caught with a knife used in the stabbing when she was arrested. So with that being said, are you surprised this case is even going to trial? And because it's going to trial, what defenses do you think the defense attorney is going to use in this case?
Yeah, so, there is a trial date that's currently set. A lot of times what happens as we head towards trial and we get closer and closer, especially in cases that have a mental health component to it, is there are pleas that are taken. One of the things that the prosecution generally does not like or want to do is they don't want to re-victimize family members and loved ones. At this trial, I'm assuming, and I'm pretty positive in saying that they're going to put mom on the stand to testify, and to have her be questioned and subject to cross-examination about the alleged attack, what was allegedly done to her, and witnessing the loss of her son is going to be very, very difficult. And can mom truly do that? Does she have the strength to do that is going to be one question. Sometimes pleas happen so that we can avoid those things. At a trial, I think that the defense is essentially going to attack the culpable mental state for these offenses and whether or not she could form the required intent to commit these acts. And I think that's what they're ultimately going to hang their hat on, some type of psychiatric defense in order to negate the alleged actions in this particular case. Will it be enough for a jury? We'll see. When there's oftentimes, unfortunately a body or somebody that has passed away as a result of someone's conduct, jurors like to hold people responsible. And so I think that in this case, there is going to be a significant likelihood that they will still hold her responsible to some extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, seeing Julian's father appear in court, and that was just such a also heartbreaking moment. I can't even imagine what it would feel like or even look like for his mom to take the stand, and I want to kind of go back to something you had mentioned earlier is that, there are so many questions as to why this happened. Again, it, just was so random. But, a few months before that fatal attack, Bionca was actually arrested states away in Florida. In the body cam video, she was asking to go to jail because she needed a place to stay. If this case does go to trial and sees through, do you think that could be used at all? Or is this something the defense may want to use or have it thrown out? What do you think?
One of the things that the prosecution, is going to try to do is they're going to try to bring in outside acts that show prior bad acts. And they do that in the event that this woman were to testify. It's the defense's job to keep these things out because they don't want the jury prejudiced. They don't want the jurors to think that because she may have acted this way in one instance, that she is likely to have acted that way in this instance, furthering her guilt, quote unquote. And so that could happen. I think this incident in Florida would be positive for the defense to bring up because, again, it shows there's something going on there beyond just the physical, and that there is a question of her mental health and competency and things of that nature. To your question earlier, and I don't think I fully got to this, was whether or not the 730 or the mental competency exam will be able to be used at trial, and it will not. At least in the state of New York, it's not. These things take place just as a mechanism to ensure that a person is competent or not competent. But ultimately, once that order is over, there's not going to be a mention of it at trial that at one point she was competent and not competent. At least there should not be. I don't think that that's appropriate for either side to bring up. And they need to just stick to the facts or the alleged facts of the case.
Well, Safa, I really appreciate your insight into this. Really got a good look into what all kind of goes down on that end of the spectrum there. Before we sign you off, though, I know this is, again, just such a hard case overall. And I know a lot of people, as you mentioned before, just want justice. Do you think justice in a way can be served if Bionca Ellis were to go to a state hospital as opposed to actually go to prison or to jail?
You know, justice looks different to different people, and I think it's more so subjective. You know, I don't think that there is any form of justice that will be able to be had to bring the young child, baby, 3 years old, back to his mother and back to his loved one. So there's no amount of justice that can do that. The issue here is what is going on with this individual's mental state that caused this individual to act in a certain way. That has to be addressed. We don't want a situation where ultimately she's released from custody and this happens again. So having her in a mental health institution so that these things can be treated properly is, in my opinion, some form of justice as best as it could be. It's not something that we would, of course, want to see happen, but for what we're dealing with in society and things like that, and for the prevention of anything further going on, I think at some point her mental health is going to have to be addressed one way or another.
All right, and I guess we'll see how this all continues to play out. Safa, again, thank you so much for your time today. I always appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Bionca Ellis previously pleaded not guilty to her charges, and she's being held on a $5 million bond. She has a final pretrial hearing set for June 18th and a trial scheduled for July 14th. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.